It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to see such a young audience. This is a very pleasant surprise. I would like to start by making one note on the previous speech. You had a great opportunity to hear one of Israel's best writers, who is writing a wonderful fiction, a wonderful and most intricate and sophisticated and beautiful literature. However, I would like to disagree completely with most of what is said as a public orator. As I said, out of great respect to his artistry, I love his writing and I think he's most thoughtful and excellent Israeli writer. I would like to disagree with him about many of the facts that he just had articulated. I would take only one. When he spoke about the law of return and who is a Jew, I would like you to know that when the law of return had been legislated, the definition of who is a Jew was taken, you won't believe it, but this is a fact, was taken from the Nazism. Whoever had been described as a Jew or defined as a Jew by Hitler had been defined as a Jew by us. In the state of Israel, this is the legal definition of who is a Jew, other than the United Nations Declaration and so on. So we didn't look for halachic definitions, nor did we consult Ezra and Nehemiah, nor did we ask the high rabbis. The Knesset Israel had decided that whoever was considered to be a Jew by the Nazis, and they looked backwards 3-4 generations. You could have been a convert for 4 generations, but if your mother and grandmother were Jews, you were a Jew and you would be sentenced as a Jew. Now this just gives you a clue to the intricacy and the complexity of the situation. Let me start by saying that when Isaiah Berlin, the great British Jewish philosopher, had been asked, what is the problem of the Jewish people? He said, there is no problem, none whatsoever. They have only far too long history and far too little geography. Now that is a wise observation. We had always too small geography. We are very tiny, we're staying in a very, very little geography, and on the very little geography that we have, there are many who wish to take part of it. And that's again a complex issue. So geography is a problem, it always was. However, our history is far greater problem, because we have 3,300 years at least of Jewish history. It means that we had plenty of time to argue about every imaginable issue. Not only who is a Jew, what is Judaism, who decides. Now, do you know that one of the most interesting things that had happened to us in the 20th century is that for the very first time, Jews who came from the mountain of Morocco had met Jews from the mountain of Russia. Jews from Ethiopia met Jews from Berlin. Jews from Poland had met Jews from Morocco. They had never known that there is such Jewish communities. They didn't know about the Jews of Kaifeng and about the Jews of Japan, or about not Japan, there were no Jews in Japan, but it was like Far East, but the Jews of Kaifeng in China, and that's Far East enough. And the Jews of India knew very little about the Jews of Galicia, if at all. However, the Jews of Galicia, or the Jews of Russia, or Poland, or Romania, were absolutely sure that nobody represents Judaism better than they. Now, the great scholar Gershom Scholem, who had established the study of Kabbalah, was among those 50 scholars that were asked by Ben Gurion, what is a Jew? He answered to him, this is a question that shouldn't be asked, because Judaism was always hyphenated. It means you can talk about Yemenite Judaism, German Judaism, ancient Judaism, modern Judaism. You need to have a hyphen. Why? Because Judaism had been defined and redefined by Jews every century, sometimes every decade. Because wherever you're coming from, or whatever is your philosophy of life, you would have to agree that the Judaism of the Gaon of Vilna is not the Judaism of Avraham Avinu. And the Judaism of the founder of Chabad, Rab Shneor Zalman Miladi, was absolutely contested and detested by the Gaon of Vilna, who said that this is not Judaism. Hundreds, thousands of people around the world who are Lubavitch would be very offended to know that in the 18th century, their perception of religion was completely considered as heresy. That was exactly as that, and they were excommunicated as heretic Jews, as Sabbatean. So Judaism is a very, very unstable thing. It is really, fluid. It's not constant. It is ever-changing. It is redefined by Jews every century. Since we have 3,300 years of Jewish history, we have endless definitions. We have questions and answers. There is only one thing that we can say for sure. All the Jews who live in the state of Israel can say we are participate in a coalition of pain and opposition of dreams. We came as persecuted, our parents came as refugees, we came to find haven and shelter, and all of us, with no exception, never came with a sword in our hand. We came with the book of Psalms, we came with the Bible, we came with Zionist agenda, we came with all kinds of dreams and memories. However, we had believed in the turn of the century that people without land are returning to land without people. It was very unjustified belief. Nevertheless, that's what they had believed. And truly so, and innocently so, they really had believed all those newcomers as pioneers and refugees and people who came for whatever reason, they believed that people without land are returning to land without people. Oh yeah, they were people without land. That was perfectly correct. But the land was not without people. In the 2,000 years that we have been in exile from the land of Israel, a land that we had commemorated every day by prayer, by study, by cultural exchange, by writing, by reading. We have in the National Library in Jerusalem, in the Hebrew University, 100,000 volumes, all written in Hebrew, and they are reflecting only from the beginning of the printing press at the end of the 15th century until the 19th century, not including at all what have been going on in the 20th century or the 21st century. I'm talking only on the centuries between the end of the 15th century to the end of the 19th century. Now listen, we have 100,000 books all written in Hebrew. On top of that, we have 80,000 manuscripts all written in Hebrew. Not a single one of them had been written by a woman. All of them had been written, printed, studied, authorized, interpreted by men. This is a significant point because while we love a great deal of our Jewish tradition, we completely disagree with all issues pertaining to discrimination of women. Because the Jewish religion, while have fantastic ideas about numerous issues, is entirely unacceptable about the perceiving women as quiet, as obedient, as illiterate, as unparticipant in the public debate. That was the situation for 2,000 years. I may say safely that from the poetry of Deborah the prophet until the beautiful writings of the turn of the 20th century, Dvorah Baron, there is not a single line written in Hebrew that had been brought to print by a Jewish woman from Deborah the prophetess in the 12th, 13th century BCE and until Deborah Baron, our Israeli writer at the turn of the 20th century CE. Not a single book was written by a Jewish woman. Yeah, Jewish women were very clever and were great mothers and were certainly the pillars of the family, but they were completely silent in the Jewish community, in the public sphere. This is something we wish to correct profoundly. We do not accept anymore halakha, which perceive women as inferior. We do not perceive any more willingly all kind of discrimination against women because of the fact that biologically they are different. I just brought this point in order to say that we are the inheritors of fantastic 3,000 years of Jewish history. But this inheritance, sometimes it's an inspiration and sometimes it's a burden. Sometimes it's an issue of debate. Sometimes it's an issue of great creativity. When you have such long history, you have a lot to deal with. Now, one major thing of importance. The fact that we have 3,000 years of history does not make others necessarily to respect it, to endorse it, to believe in it, to accept it. This is not automatic. I've been asked to speak in Jordan in the Konrad Adenauer gathering for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The issue was Jerusalem. You know, you may think, what a better subject. According to nominal order or historical order, Jews are first, Christians are second, Muslims are third. When I started by saying that according to biblical history, the city of Jerusalem had been built by David about 3,000 years ago, the Muslim imam that spoke after me said, Professor Elior, it's a very beautiful lecture, only not a single word is true. Why? Because Jerusalem and the temple in it was built by the angel Gabriel, by the first man, and he was Muslim. The very first human being was Muslim, so he said that is the belief of the Islamic imam, and there are many others who think this way. The fact that this is our heritage, or that we believe that for us the Bible is holy, our heritage is extraordinary, important for us, our Hebrew language is sacred, our texts are sacred. It is not necessarily so for people who are not Jews. We have to deal today with the question, what do we do in order to be a democratic Jewish state who can respect other people's mythologies, beliefs, religions, and not exclusively the religions and beliefs and dreams of the Jewish people? This is a great challenge, but this is certainly the challenge of the Jewish people all over the world for the 21st century. We learn to live with democracy, we learn to live with equal rights, we have to learn to live with human rights, and yet to do our best to cultivate the fantastic Jewish heritage, Jewish languages, Jewish culture, Jewish religion by choice, not by enforcement, by culture, not by strict legislation. Anything that the Jews who are lovers of freedom would do would be much better than they would have to be done, than they would be enforced to be done, to do by the state law. I would say one last sentence. In the caves of Qumran, we found 1,000 pieces of parchment relating to the whole biblical library, relating to a great deal of mystical poetry, relating to legal traditions. Among the most beautiful verses there, it's all written in Hebrew, most of it in Hebrew, a little bit in Aramaic. It is said, Ruchot da'at emet v'tzedek bekodesh kodashim. Spirits of knowledge, truth, and justice are in the Holy of Holies. If it was true for the Jews of the 2nd century before the Common Era, Ruchot da'at emet v'tzedek, spirits of knowledge, truth, and justice, this is a guideline for us 2,300 years later. Thank you very much.